Good morning and welcome to the 6th edition of AviaDev Insight Live. My name is John Howell. I'm the CEO and founder of AviaDev Africa, your African aviation platform dedicated to supporting the development of air connectivity to, from, and most importantly, within the African continent. I'm coming to you today from a freezing cold Manchester, UK. I'd much rather be in a sunny and warm Malawi, Sean, so thank you for rubbing it in a little bit. And so do let us know. I see you all are doing it already, but do let us know where you're joining us from this morning in the chat function. This is episode 154 of the only podcast dedicated to African aviation. So I'd like to warmly welcome all of our listeners who are listening back to this and not here with us live, but thank you everybody who's made the effort to join us live as well. I'm really delighted to see such an esteemed audience. We were looking through the registrations and we've got an absolutely fantastic audience with us today. We've got airline CEOs, we've got policymakers, and we've got professionals from all sectors that are playing a vital part in keeping Africa connected and will play a vital part in the restart and the recovery of our wonderful industry. Now, our aim with these sessions is to dive deeper under the surface of our great and complex industry to discuss and discover some solutions that are going to enable the industry to first survive and secondly, to thrive in the years to come. Aviation is just too important, as we all know, to both global economic recovery and especially African development and economic recovery as we move out of the pandemic. The event is also your opportunity to pose your questions. So thank you to everybody who sent in questions ahead of the session. And please allow me now to introduce my very special guest for today's event. So Mr. Berthé, if you can start your video and join me on stage. My special guest is Secretary General of the African Airlines Association, or AFRAA, Mr. Abdérahmane Berthé. Before taking the helm of AFRAA, Mr. Berthé was the CEO of Air Mali and Air Burkina. He has 31 years of experience in the airline industry and 16 years as an airline CEO. He's built his career in aviation across various airlines and multicultural environments, both in Europe and Africa, across a variety of disciplines such as aircraft performance, dispatch engineering, maintenance and operations quality, ground operations, and executive leadership. So welcome back to the podcast and welcome to AviaDev Insight Live, Mr. Berthé.
Thank you, John.
So where are you today? Tell us all, where are you joining us from today? And is it a bit warmer than it is here in Manchester?
I'm joining you on the stage from Nairobi in Kenya, where AFRAA is based. The weather is changing. It's raining sometimes, sunny sometimes. So we are okay.
Great. Well, I'd swap it in a heartbeat. So let's talk about where we are today. You know, pre-pandemic, you were traveling all over the place. There were so many engagements. There was so much going on in terms of development, in terms of conferencing. And now obviously we're living in this virtual world. So how have you adapted to that and how have you found that experience?
I'll start to tell you, it's a long time we didn't meet physically. We are meeting now on virtual. So the COVID-19 has changed our lifestyle. Before the pandemic, we were traveling for multiple business meetings around the continent. Today, new technologies are brought in a virtual world where we can continue working with our members, our partners, and stakeholders. I do hope we will have opportunity soon when the vaccine will be extended in Africa to resume with our physical meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll get to conversations around that sort of a little bit later on. But I wanted to start the session, first of all, by sending our commiserations here at AviaDev to all of the people who were impacted directly or indirectly by the liquidation of one of your members, Air Namibia, this week after 75 years. It's an airline with a great history, closing its doors. You know, any comments on this from your side, and how can we avoid more following suit?
Yes, this is a very sad news for our industry. Air Namibia has been a very active member of AFRAA. I hope the country will set up soon a new airline. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of all AFRAA members to express our solidarity with Air Namibia staff members, and I wish them the best future.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I'm sure they appreciate that too. So talking about your current membership as well, let's get a bit of a temperature check on the sort of feeling of your current membership and what the sentiment is. You know, what are they telling you right now are their biggest concerns, and what are AFRA's biggest priorities as we sit here on the 12th of February 2021?
The majority of airlines are in a very difficult financial situation today. The biggest challenge of our industry is how to resume activities to a good level. All African airlines are impacted financially. Total revenue loss in 2020 is around $10.10 billion. Capacities was down to 38% last year. And this situation is unlikely to improve in 2021. The global airline industry is expected to recover to 2019 levels in about 2024. We have aligned our priorities to cope with the effect of the COVID-19. In this regard, AFRA's 5-year strategic plan takes into account actions geared towards an efficient recovery of the air transport sector. And for 2021, it is important to pursue the financial support to airlines to facilitate their recovery, to implement the recommendation of the ICAO CART 1 and CART 2 to enhance health security and restore the confidence of passengers to come back to travel, to enhance cooperation between African airlines for better connectivity, cost reduction, and revenue increase. To provide also consultancy to airlines and the industry at large to ensure critical skills are current. And as you know, AFRAA has started the consultancy unit since the end of 2019.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we're going to pick up, I think, on all of those points. We had a question from Nelly Fualdez, who's the economic reporter at Jeune Afrique. She was asking specifically in terms of how much did the states promise to their national airlines and how much of that has actually been released? Do we have issues still with the finance? We've heard about this before, that there was quite a lot promised, but a lot of difficulty in actually getting it where it's needed. And where did this money come from? Did any of it come from anywhere other than the governments itself? Did any come from private businesses? I'm sure those airlines that are already operating, have obviously had to raid the piggy bank to keep themselves going. So can you give us a bit of an overview in terms of what support has been secured and who's been the recipient?
You see, we made a lot of appeals since the beginning of the COVID-19 in March 2020 to government in March, and also to development and financial institutions in May. As a result of our appeal, we have seen in December that 9 African countries have released $2.5 billion to the air transport sector. Many states have granted financial support to their national airlines, but still, this is not enough. We are then urging government and DFIs to equally support the privately owned airlines, because we also have many privately owned members at AFRAA.
Oh, very interesting. So I know that this week, obviously Kenya Airways received some financial support. I know that early on, there were countries like Morocco, Senegal that made big investments and provided support in that respect as well. It's interesting you talk about obviously the equal support, because that's part of the issue here. You know, if you're ownership is the government, it's quite hard to to sort of spread that accordingly. And is there any update? When we spoke with we spoke with Raphael Cucci, we spoke with Adefunke as well, and they were talking about this huge amount of money that was sort of being put into place through the African Union and different mechanisms. You know, we talked about sort of this number of $30 billion, which would make a huge difference. And if that had been released and provided as support, you know, maybe Air Namibia would still be with us. So is there still a bottleneck there in terms of that money is sat there and we're still deciding exactly where it comes from on a sort of Pan-African level?
Yes, AFRAA participated to the African Union Commission high-level task force set up in May for the recovery of aviation sector in Africa. The task force come out with some recommendations. One of the recommendations was to put in place a fund of $25 billion for the sector. And we, by state and DFIs, we are following the implementation of this recommendation with the African Union Commission, which is leading the process. I know that the African Union Commission wrote to the Development and Financial Institution about it. And I've been told that soon during this quarter, the African Development Bank and the AfrExim Bank will announce their participation and their support for this fund. And for me, really we need to push and to hasten the implementation of this fund to avert over bankruptcy among African airlines.
Yeah, it does definitely seem very slow when you see how obviously on a state level, it's easier to make a commitment, you know, like we saw in Germany with Lufthansa getting 7 billion euros. It's quite easy to say, right, our carrier, here's some money, same in Senegal, same in Morocco. The challenge is the mechanism on a Pan-African scale. But the truth is we just can't wait much longer for this relief. Otherwise the airlines are really going to struggle. Although having said that, we've seen some actually be quite innovative in their models. Like we saw Kenya Airways with their freighter, with their 787, they've converted into cargo and to diversify into those kind of markets. You know, you see that as a step forward, or is that a stopgap until the passenger traffic recovers?
Yes, we have seen since the start of COVID-19 an increase on cargo activities to transport essential medical equipment and also PBEs. And now the cargo will play a very important role to transport the vaccines across the continent. Some of AFRAA members are preparing to themselves to be able to carry these vaccines. You talk about Kenya Airways, one of our very important members who has converted a Dreamliner to be able to carry cargo. We can talk about African Airlines, and also one of our cargo members based in Nairobi, which is Astral Aviation. They have received 10 days ago a Boeing 767 freighter in their fleet. And African Airlines are preparing to be able to transport vaccines across the continent.
Yeah, well, this is going to come up later, but actually 2 weeks today, Sanjeev, the CEO of Astral, is going to be my guest on this very program. So we'll talk to him all about the cargo market and the strides that they've made during this. And I think that we can't lose sight. We're not always the best in aviation at promoting ourselves, and the fact that the vaccines now are going to be relying on air transport to get them around Africa and around the world. The fact that when the pandemic hit, the PPE was only able to be transported around because of aviation. You know, we need to make a song and a dance about how we are really supporting the recovery and bringing all of this into the into the market as well. So it can't be all doom and gloom, the messaging. I think, you know, there is an opportunity for us to really push that messaging forward. To stay on the finance side, because I had a couple of questions. I've had a question in from Eddie Brown. He's the AVP marketing for Ergo Capital, and he looks after the African market. Now, it's quite a long question, but it's about leasing, basically. So he says, you know, access to financing remains a huge barrier to entry for both airlines and lessors to deploying aircraft across Africa, which I think we all agree on. To finance new deliveries, airlines can finance their aircraft with relative ease, in that it's not always easy, but the mechanism is there, that the markets are open to that. The OEMs are quite interested in doing that. However, once you go a little bit lower and you get into midlife aircraft, where he believes the majority of the demand is in Africa, the financing options actually drop quite substantially. So if the airline looks to buy, they will need finance. That obviously comes with a high interest rate and a lot of debt, and they've got to still pay a big amount up front. And it's really putting off those airlines I'm talking to. It's hard to get that initial capital. So his question is, how can AFRA work with the smaller airlines who aren't backed by the governments or large institutions to actually bring down the financing costs? And is one solution of this an African leasing company, which was discussed by the African Development Bank? I don't know whether you've got any insight on that, what you think of that idea.
Yes, this is a very critical question. Financing aircraft and leasing aircraft also. In 2018, the African Development Bank started the initiative to create an African leasing company. I know also that AfRexim Bank is willing to support this kind of initiative to create an African leasing company solution. And at AFRA, we will push for a joint initiative between IFDB and AfRexim Bank to make this project effective. At our level, we think that the best way to reduce financing costs for airlines is to create sustainability and profitability, because financing is also linked to the profitability of airlines. So sustainability is one of our 5 strategic objectives. Under these objectives of sustainability, we advocate for the reduction of the high cost environment of African airlines. I would like to talk about taxes, fees, and charges. And also, we lobby for market access. Market access is also something very important for airlines to be able to increase their revenues and enhance connectivity for the aviation sector in Africa.
Yeah, I think one point I want to pick up on there, because I totally agree that obviously we need to create that sustainability, but obviously a startup can't prove that because it doesn't have an operation. It's trying to get itself going, so it needs that robust business model. And then, of course, you know, as I famously spoke to somebody from a bank down in a bank down in South Africa, and they said, look, if you're a startup, don't come to me, come to a venture capitalist or somebody with lots of money, because I'm not going to lend you money on a business plan if you don't have capital behind you. So, you know, there is that challenge. I want to pick up on the taxes, fees, and charges side of things, because I want to get your feeling on this in terms of the work that you're doing and the conversations you're having with an organization like ACI, for example, because, you know, we know that airport revenues, just like airline revenues, are way down, same with civil aviation authorities. So when we start to see some sort of recovery, the airports are going to be under pressure to maintain, to be able to recover some of the fixed costs and the debt that they will have incurred. Do we think that their their charges, because obviously we can't put them in the taxation bucket, that's determined by governments, but the charge side of it is obviously determined by the airports themselves. And with the lack of traffic, do you think that when we come back, it's feasible to say to them, hey, can we have the charges kept low? Or are they going to straight away, which we've seen in Europe already, say, look, we still have those costs to pay. They're going to go up, and all that's going to do is push the cost of operation higher and obviously make it more expensive for people to fly. How do you see that, and what conversations have you had with ACI?
You are touching here a very, very important question. I talk about this issue of taxes and charges with the Secretary General of ACI Africa at many occasions. And today at AFRAA, we think that only one stakeholders like AFRAA cannot tackle the issue of it need to be a joint initiative between in the industry. You know, we have an organization which is AAIG, and African Airlines Aviation Industry Group. And under this industry group, AFRAA will make a proposal to our other stakeholders to have a joint initiative on reducing the charges, but at the same time, as you rightly said, airport need also to have more activities and more revenue. So we need to reduce taxes and charges so that we can reduce fares for passengers to boost the traffic. And at the same time, when the traffic will increase, airport will have more traffic, more passengers. So it goes together. So we need to have a joint initiative. And AFRAA will put on the table a proposal under the IG group.
Okay, great. Yeah, so Shamsu, who heads up the AAIG, who's coordinating that, he's a good friend of ours. He's been on the podcast as well, and we wish him well with that initiative, and we're here to support that however we can as well.
I hope one day you will invite him on your stage.
Oh yeah, he's been on the podcast, but we'll once we get a bit more visibility in the AAIG, he may be in the audience today. So let us know if you are okay. Shamsu. Yeah, you know, I know that he's very much engaged in this as well. So we kind of touched on it from a taxation perspective, but of course, it's in the African context and actually globally, politics and governments are so embedded into our industry. And we had a question from Alfred Kumbate. I know he's on the call. He's actually a master's student studying in Dakar at the university there in Senegal. And he basically asks a question about our good friend SAATM. And he says, you know, how enthusiastic are your members about SAATM? Because of course, we know that your members control the majority of the capacity and the majority of the seats in the market within Africa to and from as well, from an African perspective. You know, with international travel suffering due to lockdowns, is now the time to actually come together and look at regional routes and look at these. We'll talk about cooperation in a minute, but to look a bit closer to home and temper those international ambitions, because actually right now those markets are effectively closed to a lot of the airlines. So give us an update as to where that conversation lies with SAATM, because I remember you know, being in a room at an AFRAA conference where I know for a fact one of the member countries has signed the memorandum of implementation, yet the CEO of that airline was saying, we don't want a free and fair, you know, we don't want SAATM involved. So how do we square that? And are we getting progress? Because we now have the Continental Free Trade Area, which I think we can talk about as well.
Yes, you are right. Some states and members have reservations about liberalization because states want to protect their national airlines for fear they are swallowed by the biggest airline if they open their skies. As of August 2020, we have 34 states which have committed to SAATM, and 18 have signed the Memorandum of Implementation. So we really need to make effective the implementation in all the willing states, all the 18 states which have signed the Memorandum of Implementation. At the same time, we need to listen to states which have reservations and give responses to these reservations. The executing agency, which is the African Civil Aviation Commission, is working to enforce the legal framework of the Yamoussoukro decision. This is very, very important. They have recruited recently the necessary staff to be able to monitor the enforcement of the legal framework. And I think this will bring more confidence of states and airlines also. And I have to add on that, for example, for the dispute settlement mechanism, the industry has been consulted by the African Civil Aviation Commission to give our inputs before it goes to the states and be put in place. So this also can bring a sort of confidence. And at AFRAA, we were scheduling, in fact, a workshop on SAATM for our members last year at end of March. Because of the COVID, we had to cancel it. So now we are thinking to have it on virtual. It will be organized by African Union Commission and the African Civil Aviation Commission. And it will be an opportunity to frankly discuss with the industry the reservations and how to make the SAATM effective. And there is a joint prioritized action plan for the implementation of SAATM since March 2018. All stakeholders are part of it. We have annual meetings to see how we progress. The next meeting will be virtual on 1st and 2nd March.
Okay, great. Okay, so the conversations are happening, absolutely. And I know that we have, I think, Stephen and Angeline from AFCAC in the audience today as well, and I'm sure Secretary General Tefera will join me on the stage soon as well and give us an update, because I think that for a lot of us in the industry, we can get a bit lost in the sort of legalities and all of the frameworks, and it gets a little confusing, and we just want to know. Okay, though I remember Rafael Cucci, when he was with IATA, saying to us, those who are ready, just go, And the thing that we've been trying to say here, and we've heard a lot from our attendees and our interviewees, is if we don't do it now in this current situation, we can't build back to an environment where African airlines are losing money, which they were pre-pandemic in what was potentially the best market conditions. Those aren't going to return necessarily. So we have to do something different, or we're going to end up with the same result. And that is one of the elements. The other element that we had a question from Talani Keshwa, who's from Zambia Airports, and it fits in quite nicely on this, and you mentioned it as one of your priorities in terms of cooperation. So he asks, what additional mechanisms have been undertaken by the Route Network Coordination Committee of AFRAA to address the increasing challenges faced by airlines, especially during the pandemic?
Yes, the Route Network Coordination Committee was created in AFRAA long time ago. We have decided to merge the Route Network Committee and the Cargo Committee, because we want to create synergies between cargo and passengers. And we have organized in December, for example, a webinar, a workshop with all our members, where we made a report on the connectivity situation within the continent. We to look at the gaps and see how we can fill the gaps. So one of our initiatives now under the Route Network Coordination and Cargo Committee, which is chaired by my friend Sanjeev of Astral. Is the chairman of this committee. The initiative is now to put in place a connectivity portal. The connectivity portal will be ready during the first half of 2021. And the objectives is to, whenever we have a new flight schedule on a season, to look at the connectivity gaps and to push airlines to fill the connectivity gaps. Because one of the main issues in Africa is the lack of connectivity. And to support this improvement of connectivity, of course, we need to have an instrument like SAATM for airlines to be able to cooperate, to have interline agreement, to have a code-share agreement also. So market access is very important if we want to improve the connectivity across the continent. We know that in all regions in the world where the liberalization is there, we see increase of the traffic, reduction of fares. So it's good for economies. In Africa, it may take some time, but the process is not reversible. We'll go to it.
Okay, yeah, okay, no, understood. And just on that, I mean, we've seen quite a lot, even through the pandemic, we've seen a lot of announcements of interline agreements. And actually, a lot of those, to be fair, have been driven by the private airlines, and a lot down in South Africa. So Airlink, and we had Roger Foster on the session, you know, they've signed interlines with lots of the Middle East carriers, and SAATM have done the same thing. And just on that topic, we do have a question as well, but one of the solutions that we think is potentially a great opportunity is, of course, virtual interlining. And for anybody who wants to find out more about that, we're going to do a workshop in a couple of months with DoHop, who are doing this very successfully with EasyJet, Lufthansa, and other airlines around the world. So if you want to know a bit more about that, it's interlining without having, and code sharing without having to do all the formal agreements. Let the technology connect you and sync your schedules together. And we had a question from Gaurav Agarwal, who's with us today. He's the director for Africa for DoHop. And he asks, he wants to know a little bit more about the objectives of the universal payment platform that you want to develop for your members under the distribution joint project, which is on the website, which is a project you're working on. You know, why is it required, and how much development, where are you up to with that project?
Yes, I agree. Interlining and the code sharing are very, very important. There are instruments really to improve connectivity and to increase the activities, the revenues of airlines. We have noticed that payments were hindering the commercial cooperation between our members, specifically the small operators. And several African countries are not on the IATA BSP operations. Our project objective is to address these challenges specific to the African continent. The payment platform is aimed to facilitate transactions between airlines which are putting in place a commercial cooperation. So we have talked about this project before the COVID. We have redefined the project under our 5 years strategic plan. And now we expect the platform to be effective by the end of 2021, because we think it's really a critical tool for the African continent to put in place and to streamline the business between cooperation between our African members, airline members.
Yeah, it is that bringing it all together. We did an interview with Miratab from Ethiopian Airlines, who's kind of headed up their move to digital, and you know their online app, their app you can get for your smartphones, fantastic, and they've had millions of downloads of that, and you can pay in you know, in Chinese currency or any currency. Like, they're making that friction, removing the friction in terms of the payment process. And I think that's what, as a traveler, that's what we're looking for, because unfortunately, as a result of this pandemic, there's going to be more friction in our journeys, because we're going to need testing, and we're going to need proof of vaccines, and we're going to need all of these other things. And I think that we need to make it easy as possible to obviously align our objectives and move things forward. So thank you for answering that one. In terms of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we talked about that, and that obviously came into force early in January. It kind of brings us back to SAATM, that can that work without SAATM, without an open skies in the markets that have tariff-free trade? But obviously, if you're then limiting where airlines can fly, that causes a big issue. And what conversations, where are you up to with the Secretariat at AfCFTA? Because they're obviously headquartered in Accra, Ghana. Can you give us an update as to how you see that going forward and the conversations you're having with AfCFTA?
You see, air transport and trade are related. You cannot open a route where you don't have any traffic. And also, it's difficult to trade if there is any transportation means between countries. So AfCFTA and the SAATM are complementary. It is important to note that the implementation of SAATM and AfCFTA will facilitate a more efficient recovery of the air transport industry. AfCFTA is a great opportunity to increase trade, tourism, and also travel activities. And AfCFTA is supposed to increase by 52% the level of trade between African countries, which is today around 15 and 18%. This is very, very low if you compare to other regions in the world. So recently, 2 weeks ago, under the leadership of the African Union Commission, all aviation stakeholders have engaged a discussion with the African Continental Free Trade Technical Team, which is based in Accra, Ghana, to create necessary links and joint action between the two projects. We have decided after this meeting to have a monthly meeting between aviation and the AfCFTA Secretariat, the technical team, for the way forward.
That's good to hear. That's good that the conversations are happening. Okay, so I'm going to start to work on the Q&A. So if you in the audience have got any questions, do.
I just want to answer one question we have received from Sin Mendes regarding the membership of AFRAA.
Yeah, please. Do you want to read it out for us, or do you want me to?
Yes, I just want to mention that at AFRAA, we have today 46 members, and we have 26 government-owned members and 14 privately owned members. We have mixed airlines, 6 also, government and private, and this make a total of 46 members. We also have a lot of industry partners we are working with.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so I think everybody in the audience can see the Q&A as well. So do continue to sort of put your questions in there. So we had a question, quite an interesting one, to come back to what we talked about earlier. Amel Basala has asked about African Airlines developing their cargo business in this difficult time. You know, we know that globally the cargo business, in terms of the amount of cargo traveled, actually transported dropped, but that's partly because of obviously a lot of it comes in belly cargo in passenger aircraft. But of course, if you're a dedicated cargo carrier like Astral, you've potentially done very well, and they received this new aircraft last month as well. So the question is, do you think that African airlines are able, in terms of governance, competency and management, to be agile enough to just adopt cargo as part of their business strategy?
Yes, I think all our members, airlines, need to rethink their business. One of the solutions today is to develop the cargo business. As I told you, we have some full cargo member airlines. I talked about Astral. We have also Allied in Nigeria. So these member airlines are doing a very good business on cargo. And also we have some members which have a cargo activity separated from the passengers activity, like Ethiopian Airlines. They have cargo aeroplanes, and also Kenya Airways. And those airlines are also now starting to develop, to increase their cargo activity. And I would like to add on that also the development of trade within Africa, with the African Continental Free Trade Area, will create a necessity to have more cargo operations within the continent. And as you know, also e-commerce is something which is coming across the world, and Africa will not be left back on that. The e-commerce also will come in Africa, and they will need also cargo operations, or even cargo on passenger aircraft also. Both need to be considered by airlines for the future developments.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And you know, as we said, there are sort of winners and losers, but there's a big enough market, and there's those trends, those macro trends that we've seen around the world. So coming back to the financial side, we've had a question from David from Tusker over in Ireland. He asks about the smaller airlines. So these could be your members, you know, the small airlines like, say, AB Aviation over in the Comoros. Are we seeing support for them, even though they're privately owned? Have any of them received any support either from the state or from other sources at this stage?
No, honestly, I have to tell you that I'm not aware of any support, direct support from government for small airlines. But I have also to mention that the financial support to airline is not only to grant funds to an airline. There are other means also to support financially the airline. It can be deferral of some charges, some taxes, reduction of some charges, some taxes also. There are other means to support the aviation sector. That was in the appeal we made to government in March to assist their member airline. We also organized in June a workshop with UNECA, Afreximbank, and IATA about financing airlines, including small airlines also. During this workshop, we were able to put in contact the bank and some of our members to see how they can be supported by the bank. But I really, honestly, I have to say that the support, financial support to airlines, the pace is very, very slow. This is something I regret, and the industry really need to keep pushing on that. I know that the African Union Commission is very concerned about it and is working on it. And I think, I hope we'll have effective support to the aviation sector very soon Otherwise, we can have other bankruptcies in the industry.
Yeah, and it's a very emotive subject, obviously, where the money goes and who gets it. So, you know, we've had that issue around the world. So, you know, if you look at the US, you have airlines that made record profits, and then obviously a lot of those profits went to their shareholders. They weren't necessarily saved for a rainy day. And then the COVID hits, and they go to the government with their hands out and say, "Can we have some money?" And of course, they put in the CARES Act and managed to keep the airlines alive and keep the staff employed. But that isn't necessarily the right model. And then the other model is an airline like Ryanair that has billions of pounds in the bank, but is now having to burn through that, but will survive it because they've kept the money back and kept it there for a rainy day, which seems, you know, almost unfair. So I'll come back to a couple of the questions. We're getting a few more come in, but I wanted to ask you this. You know, do you, in a week that we've had obviously Air Namibia liquidated, we've also had conversations. We've seen information that Benin is looking to start a national carrier, that Guinea is kickstarting its national carrier. You know, is African aviation and the airline business, is it too fragmented? Are there too many players? And is this crisis going to create consolidation? And do you think every country has, we're not denying that they have the right to have a national airline, but, you know, do they have the business? Is there a business case to have a national airline? Because it seems that everybody wants to try, I suppose.
I will start by saying it is very, very important of any promoter of a business, an airline, to make a business case before you start. This is very, very important. You need to make sure that it's a good opportunity for you. And we are seeing that many African states are willing to set up a national carrier and even to create a hub in their capital city. For me, it's also important. Those airlines need really to cooperate, because in the long term, I do think we'll have 5 or 6 mega global carriers, and which will be based on some mega hubs in the continent. But these mega carriers will not be able to cover all the continent. You see, African continent is very, very big, and there are 54 states. So we need also a side to have some regional operators which will link in between the mega hubs to create a good level of connectivity within the continent. For sure, I think some consolidations will be necessary to build this type of air transport network on the continent. And then for this consolidation, maybe there will be some political considerations, state sovereignty. But at the end of the day, we need to have an air transport system which works. No need to continue creating airlines, and 4 or 5 years later on, those airlines are going into bankruptcies. It's a lot of money lost by the African economies. So we need to rethink the business, to have mega big global carrier and to have some inter-regional carriers. And the two system needs really to work together. And for that, we need to have the SAATM, we need to have the African Continental Free Trade Area. We need also to have a free movement of people across the continent. We need also for sustainability to address the issue of high taxes.
Okay, yeah, I'm totally with you there. So we've only got another 5 or 10 minutes left. There's lots of questions coming in, and but I want to sort of focus on your roadmap now for AFRAA for the next 3 months? I mean, let's not look too much further ahead. You know, we talked about the priorities, but what activities have you got? And just to build into that, we've just had another point raised. You know, you obviously created the 9-pillar recovery plan at the beginning of the pandemic, and you've worked on that as we've gone. And you released an infographic which we'll share with everybody. We'll share the link. Maybe Maureen can put the download link in the chat as well, so everyone can have a look at that. But how would you rate the effectiveness of that 9-pillar recovery plan? Have you been frustrated by slow progress, or is there anywhere specific you can say we've made really good progress with one thing or another?
Yes, we have defined a recovery plan, a COVID-19 recovery plan in April under 9 pillars. Some action were to be undertaken by AFRAA, by Airline, by aviation stakeholders also. At AFRAA level, we have launched in August, for example, a capacity sharing portal, and which is aimed to create a market, an aircraft availability market for airlines. And as of today, we have 26 subscribed airlines, and we have 37 aircraft available on the portal. And also talk about the connectivity portal. And the webinar we organized in December for our member to show the gaps, connectivity gaps, the opportunities for cooperation among our members also. And on the level of appeals, you see in April, May, and AFRAA has been very active in all the African industry, the stakeholders meeting around the recovery of industry. And we will be continuing to do so also. And in June, for example, we wrote to the regional economic communities to urge them to reopen the borders as soon as possible and to harmonize the health security protocols within their region. And effectively, the reopening in the continent, depending on the region, was between 1st January and July 2020 and the end of July 2020. We also made appeals for slot utilizations rules waiver at airports. And in July, for example, we created a monthly industry affairs webinar. And we are continuing to do it every month. It's the last Wednesday of every month to discuss. It creates a forum where we give to our members the status of the industry, the new evolutions, and also it's the question for the Secretariat to better understand the expectations of our members. And from this webinars, also we have undertaken some specific actions towards states, governments, and other stakeholders.
Great. I mean, I remember being, because I was obviously involved in the AGA back in November, and I remember that conversation that happened between Alan at Kenya Airways and Yvonne at Rwanda, where they were basically saying, hey, you know, we should look at cooperation, we should partner, we should work together, you know. And I guess that's the question, is off the back of, I know it's early days, it was December, but you think that we'll see some successes? Because if you look at the East African market, it, you know, traditionally 6-7 years ago, there was Ethiopian and Kenya Airways. Now you've got new players like Air Tanzania, Uganda Airlines, Rwanda. And, you know, to my mind, I don't feel like they're working closely enough. They're trying to take a section of each other's market and compete rather than cooperate. So, and they're all your members. I think all of those airlines are members of AFRAA. So is that one of the solutions, maybe, to look at this in a regional context and say, there's no point with Air Mauritius collaborating with Congo Airways because it's not necessarily a market, but within the East African market, how can we all benefit from cooperating a bit closer?
Yes, you see, currently we are seeing that domestic and intra-African markets are playing a very important role in African Airlines operations. And intra-regional activities are very, very important. And the needs for transport by region within a sub-region in Africa is still very, very important. And it's difficult for one airlines to respond to all these needs. So cooperation is really something which is necessary. And I have to confess that the level of cooperation between African airlines today is very, very low. That's why through our route network committee and cargo committee, we are trying to put this cooperation as critical. And that's why we are developing the connectivity portal. That's why we'll be developing also the payment solutions. And for us, this is the future. We really need to have this regional air transport system working very well with a very, very good connectivity. And also African Airlines are now realizing, because of the lockdown in many countries, the second wave, travel restrictions, quarantine requirement, that the level of traffic between the African continent and other continents is very low. So they need to really develop successfully the intra-African travel. And AFRAA want to take the lead on this process of developing the intra-African market.
Great, and we support that entirely. I mean, it's the good old African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that that's really important right now to bring everybody together and say, look, there's going to be benefit here mutually of us working together. And if we don't do it now, I just don't know, when we're going to do it, but we need the infrastructure around it. So I want to say thank you. It is now, our time is almost up. I just want to, as a final question to you, and then we've just got a couple of events that are coming up, dates for people's diaries that we want to share. But I just wanted to just ask you, the audience who are not members, who are sitting on the outside like myself, how do we connect and keep updated with what AFRAA are doing?
Well, first of all, our next event will be our convention, which will be virtual in May. It will be hosted by Ethiopian Airline. And if anyone wants to connect with AFRAA, you can do it through our email address, which is very simple. It's afraa@afraa.org. afraa@afraa.org.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Berthé. And